Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Hey, we're looking at one of our regular books here that actually kind of fits the theme for the month. We're continuing with Love and Death in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run with Swamp Thing number 31. So what's been going on is kind of a lot. I mean, this is pretty much the definitive run on Swamp Thing. This is the one story I had a trade of when I was younger, and this is the best one as far as, I know. This is kind of the end of the beginning for the Alan Moore run. Kind of separating the Swamp Thing character from everything that was maybe holding Swamp Thing back from everything Alan Moore wanted him to be. You got these supporting characters, Abigail and Matt Cable, who used to be Swamp Thing's adventuring buddies, then they got married, and then Matt got into an accident and developed magic powers, but these were magic powers that only kind of worked when he was drinking and miserable. So that kind of went down the wrong rabbit hole pretty quickly. This all culminated during a night when Abigail had to go up to the facility for kids, I think, that she worked at, and Matt was drunk, tried to go after her in his car, ran off the road, and managed to grievously injure himself. But before he died, he was able to make a deal, only it turned out that the thing he made a deal with was Abigail's uncle, Arcane, who's the most evil character in the Swamp Thing universe. So now Anton Arcane is back on Earth, and he's got Matt Cable's powers to use as he sees fit. And he's brought a whole bunch of evil souls with him back from hell. And the last couple of issues were all about putting Abigail through the ringer, first psychologically, then physically, ending the book with Swamp Thing carrying Abigail's corpse out of the house. So, I mean, this is kind of groundbreaking stuff at the time. I think about where these characters started, and maybe like 10 years previous, where Anton Arcane was an evil scientist in quotes, and he lived up in a castle, and he had a laboratory, and he was trying to discover a formula for extended life. And, it's a very traditional kind of, it's not even really scary, it's just more gothic than anything. But Alan Moore's like, no, I think we can turn up the intensity on that. And that was kind of his mission starting out here. So we can start with the cover. Not one of the best covers. I will say the Swamp Thing issues we've covered so far generally don't have great covers. There are a couple coming. So far, the first one from this storyline with the close-up on the bug eyes. That's probably the best one we've seen so far. I mean, this is fine. This is essentially the story from the book. Swamp Thing's carrying Abigail's corpse through the snow while Anton Arcane, inhabiting Matt Cable's body, floats along after him, along with all of his kind of little demon pets. So it gets across at least what's going to be happening in this one. And at this point, I think the Swamp Thing story has built enough buzz that you're not buying it because you're going to get blown away by, the awesome visuals, although there are some awesome visuals from time to time. It's more about the story and just kind of seeing what we can do with this character and see if we can unnerve some readers. So as I said, in the last issue, we ended things with Swamp Thing carrying Abigail's corpse out of her room and saying, how long has she been dead? And I mean, this is comics. That can mean a few different things. It doesn't necessarily mean she's dead. He could be talking about brain death. He could be talking about, they could come up with a way to resurrect her in this issue. But Alan Moore starts off by kind of waving off that notion, getting a first-person perspective from Swamp Thing, saying, I close my eyes, she's alive in the private night behind my eyelids, the smell of her skin in the diluted autumn sunlight, the fine white hairs upon her neck, upon her arms. Then I open my eyes, and Abby is still dead. And, kind of a striking sequence to start things off with. I wonder if Alan Moore because Alan Moore, of course, has a tendency to do thumbnails for his books. I wonder if he was doing it back here, because while this is the first North American comic that Alan Moore wrote, I think he had enough of a reputation going where he could suggest what the finished pages should look like. This is going to be penciled by Rick Veitch, not Steve Bissette, which has some interesting effects. Rick Veitch maybe doesn't have the same, very much doesn't have the same kind of finish as Steve Bissette. Not very many people do have the same kind of finish as Steve Bissette, for better or for worse. But Rick Veitch is very good at page and panel design and coming up with interesting ways to tell a story. And this, of course, is going to be inked by John Totleben. And I feel like we should mention the colorist, Tatiana Wood, because she does do some pretty nice-looking stuff in this one. The story in this one is going to be pretty slow-moving. It's actually mostly about, the first half is mostly about just sinking in the fact that Abby is actually dead. She's not coming back. Swamp Thing doesn't have a way to save her because he's already too late. So, we're starting out in the house that Abigail and Matt, in quotes, were living in just prior to Abigail discovering the truth about who she was sharing her bed with. And, it's an evil house in the bayou. As Swamp Thing carries Abby's corpse down the stairs here, just all the demons that Arcane has summoned up from hell are just gibbering all around him. And his only thought is that he has to get Abby away from here. Even though, this nothing is really going to hurt her at this point. But again, it's more just about how wrong it is to have her corpse in this place. And we're getting, like already some pretty imaginative page designs going on here. Kind of get a broken glass effect with these irregularly shaped panels. Nice double page spread with Swamp Thing busting out of the panel borders here as he busts out of the house. That's some good stuff. And yeah, so makes his way out onto the lawn here and is just resting for a moment. And Arcane is still in the house for a second and then explodes it all around him in a friggin' awesome looking panel. Rick Veitch was doing this stuff in the last issue, now that I think of it. Like really weird kind of designs for panels and that kind of thing. Just absolutely wild looking stuff. And I mean, we know about Steve Bissette that he hates a 9-panel grid, or any kind of panel grid, really. You get the feeling Rick Veitch, he doesn't necessarily have a problem with doing a panel grid, but it's like, why would we when we can do something way more interesting? And yeah, so Arcane is just showing off at this point, showing the extent of the power that he's stolen from Matt, essentially. He didn't really trick Matt, except that Matt didn't know who he was making a deal with and how he was going to be saved from the car wreck. So yeah, I mean, I guess there is some trickery going on. It's just kind of, withholding information. So Swamp Thing obviously is beside himself because Abby's the one person in the world that he cares about the most. And Arcane has a moment where he's just like, oh shit, I didn't know she meant this much to you. I'm really sorry about this there, Holland, because he keeps calling him Holland because he thinks he's Alec Holland, which is what Swamp Thing thought up until a few issues ago. And a few issues ago was when Swamp Thing discovered he's not Alec Holland. He's basically just a simulacrum that the Swamp created using Alec Holland's consciousness as kind of a template. But, as Swamp Thing's carrying Abby in his grief, Arcane is still floating after him, still just kind of, like calling over his shoulder, just taunting him the whole time. Just be like, oh, well, like if it hurts you that much, I've got good news. That isn't even actually Abby. This has all just been a trick. That's actually just a very exact copy that I made using the powers that I have at my disposal now that I have control of Matt Cable's body. So, I mean, Abby's fine. This was just to kind of piss you off for a minute. And it really does piss you off, does it? Like, you might even want to just rip the head off the thing as sort of an act of defiance. And you get a moment where Swamp Thing's like sneering at Abby in his arms. And it's like, oh shit, is he actually going to do that? But then he kind of snaps out of it and goes, no, this is Abby. You're lying. She is dead. And Arcane pops up over his shoulder and goes, yes, really dead. Again, just to kind of drive it home. I do love this era of Swamp Thing. Just the finish that John Totleben is getting on the character. I do think this is mostly John Totleben. You can find some sketches by him exclusively, and it looks almost identical to the version that ended up in the comics. So anyway, Swamp Thing keeps walking through the snow, and you get the impression that Arcane isn't quite satisfied with the reaction he's gotten out of him yet. Swamp Thing was responsible for Arcane's death the first time. So this is all about just making Swamp Thing pay and just feeling as much anguish as possible. So when he just kind of stoically wanders off into the snow carrying Abby, that's not good enough. So he has to catch up to her and go, you know what? You haven't heard the best part yet. She's not just dead. Her soul is also in hell. See, because this is the power that I've managed to get myself now, where I can take this pure, untarnished soul and condemn it to the darkest pits. And at the same time, resurrect a whole bunch of evil people who have done horrible shit. And get a lot of that John Totleben using the, brushstroke hatching to try and get values. It's where he just kind of varies the line weight on the hatching all the time. It's an interesting effect. It's not one that I always agree with, but it's very clear you're looking at a John Totleben piece when you see it, at least. We get a bit of a recounting of Arcane's trip from hell back into the world of the living, where he's just kind of this formless shape with the arcane head, which is kind of a cyborg spider humanoid. He really turned himself into an absolute monster in his search to become immortal. And then with all these evil souls clinging onto him as he makes his way up from the pit. Get a brief description of the kind of people that he's brought up with him, like Sally Parks, who was a pretty young woman who killed a whole bunch of people in a whole bunch of weird ways, until she was eventually gunned down by some cops one night. We got Gus Pritchett, who used to smother kids in refrigerators, and Betty Montclair, who killed herself in a garage after committing a crime that cannot easily be put into words, which is an easy way to say, yeah, no, it was awful. And I don't really want to come up with anything that much more horrible than smothering kids in refrigerators right now, so we'll just say that for the moment. We're running out of space on the page anyway. And the point is that Arcane can bring up the absolute worst from hell. And this is only the beginning. He's going to keep doing this. Because as he says, this is the apocalypse, and it's his apocalypse, as he vomits like a stream of, I guess, wasps at Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing goes running off into the swamp. And it seems like things have gotten kind of hopeless, which is the state that Arcane wants Swamp Thing in. He kind of yells after him, "Run encumbered with your stupid, pointless burden, for there is no rock to hide you, no beacon of incorruptible goodness to light your way." And finishes saying, "No celestial force that watches over us." So from there, we have to have an Alan Moore cut to a celestial force that watches over us, as we're going to check in with the Monitor, who's in a Dr. Claw chair right now. I assume this is because the Crisis on Infinite Earths event is right around the corner, and DC Editorial is kind of pushing on everybody to try and mention the Monitor at some point or another, or something related to the event anyway. Because otherwise, there's really no reason for this. As Monitor's assistant, Lila, like in the last issue, they were also keeping track of weird shit going on in the Bayou, like all sorts of weird magic shit. And yeah, things are just getting worse, and the Monitor is fighting the urge to, for once in his life, look away. So it's like, okay, that didn't have anything to do with anything. It actually just kind of dampens things down a little bit, because we get weird superhero stuff in the middle of this gothic horror story. So yeah, I assume that's editorial pushing that. So that's all we need to see of the Monitor in this issue, at least. You know, like that's the one comfort, is that at least when we do have to cut away to the weird shit that's mandated into the comics around this time, we only have to put up with it for like a page. All right, so cutting back to Alec, still running through the snow, and he's kind of going back over everything that led up to this, and everything that he ignored leading up to this, all sorts of signs and portents. So starting with a dream where he was talking to Abby, and she kind of looked over and went, "Oh yeah, no, there's my husband and my uncle, and they're just talking, and they're inseparable insects." And that, it sounds like the kind of thing that is just like dream gibberish. They received a warning from Etrigan, and there were also some omens leading up to this, where he found a bird, and that he thought was alive, only it turned out it was full of bugs. We keep coming back to bugs when it comes to Arcane. And of course, Arcane is following him every step of the way. And still just taunting him, just saying, "What, are you tired? Are you tired of all this pointless running? The swamps aren't going to help you right now. This is my world now." And Swamp Thing makes it to this one spot in the swamp where snow hasn't touched the ground. It's just in like a perfect circle. And that's where he's going to make his final stand here. And this is where the flaw in Arcane's whole plan comes into play, because he thought he was dealing with Holland this whole time. That was his whole focus, was taking revenge on Alec Holland. Whereas, of course, Swamp Thing has recently learned, he is not Alec Holland in any kind of way. He's an elemental guardian of the swamps. And while he doesn't have any magic per se that he knows of anyway, he does have that elemental power that he can draw from. And this place in the swamp is his place of power, where all of a sudden Swamp Thing is the one in control. Get the awesome close-up on Swamp Thing as he turns to face Arcane, and just gears up for a big punch to the breadbasket, which does hurt Arcane, and that in itself shocks him, because there should be no way for Swamp Thing to be able to hurt him as far as he knows, except for that elemental power. So the one thing I'll say doesn't quite live up to the billing is this first punch from Swamp Thing to Arcane, where it kind of feels like the wind gets knocked out of your cells a little bit. It feels a little bit anticlimactic, but that's okay, because we're going to build back off it. But we did get this awesome close-up here. I like this one here as well, with the forced perspective, probably on Swamp Thing's hands. I imagine he can actually grow his hands to be gigantic if he wants, but I don't think he knows how to do that at this point. And the next 2 pages is Swamp Thing using that elemental power to beat the living shit out of Arcane. And it's kind of a great cathartic moment, because up until now, Arcane seemed like he had all the cards, and Swamp Thing had absolutely nothing. Just keeps smashing him into the dirt, while basically yelling how offensive he finds everything Arcane does. We're going to cut briefly to a bunch of people who are wandering in the direction of the plantation house in the bayou. Because that happened in the last issue too, where just everything evil for like 100 miles started wandering towards Louisiana. But with Arcane getting rocked like this, all of a sudden their momentum gets stopped and just kind of start, swaying in the wind. Yet more shots of Swamp Thing just, again, pounding on Arcane here. This great looking shit getting all uplit and everything. Cut back to Sally Parks, who was flirting with a guy before, and all of a sudden the guy started screaming as Sally Parks turns back into a corpse with a bullet hole in her forehead. Because again, Arcane's hold on his magic is slipping He's losing his focus a little bit with all of these fists in his face. And we got to the point where Matt Cable's body is starting to basically split halfway down, where, like half of him still looks like Matt, the other half just looks like Arcane with this, like shattered glass eyeball and everything. But like awesome looking spread there. And so, this battering he's taken has loosened his grip on his focus and on his magic. It's also loosened his grip on his control over this body. Like Matt Cable is essentially dead or just about dead, but there's enough of him left that with Arcane in a weakened state, he can start to take control back. Because he wanted his life to be spared, but he didn't want any of this shit. And we get like an actual like split down the middle here. I mean, which the face has been doing for the last few pages. It's been kind of a slow build. I think it started really, here, just before Swamp Thing started beating on him. So anyway, the beatdown seems to have weakened Arcane quite a bit, but it's questionable whether or not Swamp Thing on his own could destroy Arcane or, send him back. But Matt Cable might be able to. Arcane tries to bargain, saying, what do you think you're doing? If you try to take back control now, me using this magic is the only thing keeping both of us alive. But that's not an argument that Matt has any interest in anymore. Because, Arcane kind of killed his wife, and that's kind of taking precedence right now. And Matt is able to take full control back again. Not full control of much anymore, but it's enough that he can cast Arcane's soul back down into the pit. And we get the long extended no as he just kind of drifts down into darkness. So now that it's just Matt in there, and he's in a weakened state himself, so he can't just repair himself the way Arcane was using his abilities to do. So all of the injuries he sustained in the car crash back in issue 29, I think it was, they're coming back. And Matt is, once again, mortally wounded. And Swamp Thing's like, well, you have your power. Can't you repair yourself? And Matt's like, well, I might have enough power to repair one person, but I'm not the one who deserves being repaired. I did let Arcane in. It was through weakness. It wasn't evil, but a lot of evil was accomplished because I was weak. So because of that, Matt doesn't really want to live, but, maybe he can bring Abby back, potentially. He's not even sure if he can. And, as the reader, we're like, oh shit, this is, it sucks that Matt's going to die, but Matt's been kind of going downhill for a long time. And I kind of like the relationship that Swamp Thing and Abigail were kind of building there. So maybe this kind of clears the way a little bit for them. So we do get our resurrection after all. And we get like a slow process of Matt trying to will Abby's body back into life. So, starting with reversing any decomposition, increasing anticoagulants in the blood, making it flow again, making the heart move, making the lungs work again, inhaling and exhaling. And all he's got to do now is try to reach her soul. And we get like this recurring motif with the hands reaching towards each other, but then, the tentacles kind of wrap all the way around Abigail's here and pull her back down. Swamp Thing for a moment is beside himself because it looks like Abigail's going to get resurrected, but Matt, he can't quite do it. He doesn't have the power, and he's too fucked up to actually complete it. And that was kind of the last bit of life left in him. So after that attempt, he just expires, and Swamp Thing is left here with Matt's corpse and what is left of Abigail. We get a cut here to a police cruiser, and to me it feels like our cops are Steve Bissette and Neil Gaiman, but I'm not 100% for sure on Steve Bissette. So they're talking about all the weird shit that's been going down in the bayou recently. When they turn a corner and find this fucked up corpse in the middle of the road. Looks like it's been in a car crash. It has like steering column fractures and everything. And that's definitely what that looks like. The only thing is where's this car? And the other guy's like, we don't have time to worry about that. Let's get him to the hospital. Maybe we can actually keep this one alive. So that was Swamp Thing brought Matt's body out to the middle of the road when the cops were coming, so that at least Matt will be, seen to. In the meantime, he does have Abigail, and her body is technically alive. She breathes, her heart beats, but as he says, a heartbeat is not a woman and a breath is not Abby. And she's just kind of empty, really. She works, but that's about it. And we end with kind of a circular thing where he says, I close my eyes, and when I open them, Abby is still dead. And this awesome splash page to end things on. That is mostly down to the colorist. For once, John Tolman did not go absolutely crazy with the textures. It looks like there was some stuff sketched out, probably largely with pencil, and there's definitely some ink work in here. But this is largely down to the colorist. What was her name again? Tatiana Wood. Not familiar, but like that is a hell of an ending splash. So yeah, I mean, that could be, the expected place where you would end the story. Where, bad guys defeated, Matthew is able to resurrect Abigail, and, he dies in the process, but it's kind of a valiant sacrifice. And maybe we can bring Matthew back at some point too. But, to go through all of that, to put Abby through just like the worst time of anybody's life possibly, and kill her up, send her down to hell, and then almost bring her back, but then just stumble at the finish line and not quite make it. That's going to just twist your audience up. That is some like masterful manipulation of a reader. So anyway, that is going to be it for this issue. This will not get continued in Swamp Thing number 32. This actually gets continued in Swamp Thing Annual number 2. And it's probably one of the best epilogues to a story that has ever been written in a comic. So next time we do a Swamp Thing, that's what we're going to be hitting. For this one anyway, though, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. So if you go subscribe there, that gives you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, everything to do with the Blood Force comic, including everything to do with the Blood Force Kickstarter. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. So yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.